For this episode of Coffee with Closers, I'm sitting down with Henry Schuck, the CEO of ZoomInfo. Henry earned his JD in law from Ohio State University. While in school, he built his first company, DiscoverOrg, from his college dorm and took the company from zero to $380 million in annual recurring revenue. He went on to acquire many of his competitors, including ZoomInfo, and took the company public in the middle of a global pandemic. Stay tuned for a conversation with Henry where he shares practical advice for entrepreneurs and business leaders on building a company without sacrificing profit.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Coffee with Closers, where business leaders share insights on how to build businesses from the ground up and best practices for innovating in their industry.
Hey Henry, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
Great. I'm excited to be here, Sam. Thank you for having me.
Man, you're an accomplished guy. You're a trained professional, attorney by profession. You went and trained at Oxford. You built a company when you were in college. You took it to almost $380 million in annual recurring revenue, bought your biggest competitors, took a company public in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, you name it, you've done a lot in your career. What's the one thing that you're super proud of from all the accomplishments you have accomplished?
So great question. And I didn't come up with a great answer. You sent me these questions and you sent me that question in advance. And I'm trying to think about what is the biggest accomplishment. It's hard to peg one thing. I will tell you the thing that I see that I'm most proud of is when one of our executives, one of our managers, one of our directors evolves as a professional and really sees. I think one of the biggest definitions or the best definitions of leadership is really being able to see something in somebody that they don't see in themselves, and then setting up a framework to help them achieve something that they didn't believe they could achieve on their own. And so I think the proudest moments are when I see people achieve the vision that I had in my mind for them. And that's a frustrating process because, not everybody gets there. And a lot of the times there's a bunch of fits and starts. And so, watching somebody who you have an incredible amount of belief and trust in get to the place that you thought they could get to and really go beyond that, those are the moments I'm most proud of.
Yeah, and I think that's a big leadership character as well, right? Because you're really seeing the potential in a person and being able to pull that out of them and help them live up to that potential as opposed to just being a follower, right? And that's the kind of people you want in your team as well, building leaders.
Totally. There are all sorts of people here today that I see today and I go, wow, they're so different than they were a year ago. They're focused on so many of the right things. They've evolved so tremendously over the last year. It's so exciting to see that happen. And then you really go, wow, actually the vision that I had for them maybe wasn't big enough because people who continue to evolve and change, they have no ceiling. And so seeing that happen within our organization is really rewarding.
That's awesome to hear. Well, they say necessity is the mother of all invention. Obviously, you saw some sort of a need in the market that caused you to want to start DiscoverOrg. Can you share a little bit about what kind of need that you saw in the market during that time back in 2007?
Yeah, so I founded DiscoverOrg, which turned into ZoomInfo in 2007. But between 2002 and 2006, I worked for a company called iProfile. This was my first job in college. So I went to college. My mom gave me $5,000, which was the remnants of a life insurance policy. And she said, this is your college fund. So, okay, great. I don't know how long that's going to take me, but it took me through the first year. And at the end of the first year of college, I had no money and I went on a job search. And I searched all across Las Vegas for a job. I ended up taking a job at a small sales intelligence company called iProfile, where we built the business from when I got there. It was the founder and myself. It was a $300,000 a year ARR business, really a lifestyle business. And we grew it from $300,000 in revenue in 2002 to just under $5 million in revenue in 2006. It got bought by private equity. I went off to law school at the end of 2006. And 1 year into my time at law school, a friend of mine who I had recruited at iProfile called me and said, hey, I want to start up my own company that's like this, that's like iProfile, but doesn't directly compete. Do you want to do it with me? And so long story short, we saw an incredible opportunity in the market, and the business iProfile, although it was doing close to 5 million when we left, it was still a lifestyle business. And so it was like the founder and a couple of college kids. And so we went at this with a vision to build a real business around the opportunity. The opportunity was there. The question was, could we build a business that really took advantage of that opportunity? And so we put, myself and my co-founder, put $25,000 on our credit cards. I shifted all my law school classes to the evenings. So my law school would start at 3:30 and often go till 10 o'clock at night. And we started DiscoverOrg. And we grew it profitably and organically through 2014 was the first time we brought in outside capital. By then, we were on about a $30 million run rate. The business was growing. It was growing profitably. We brought in TA Associates as our first private equity sponsors and continued to grow the business and had opportunity to do M&A along the way. We actually bought that company iProfile in 2015. Integrated it, and then continue to grow the business.
So you think, I know this was actually prior to even starting law school, so you think that having worked at that place is what kind of led you into the data business?
Totally.
And
now,
so
yeah, go ahead.
No, it's because data is now the new oil, right? Because that's where everything is. Everybody's in the data business. So that's why I was curious how that journey even started.
Yeah, totally. Like, interestingly, one of the reasons I got the job at iProfile was when I was in high school, I started working on political campaigns, and I ended up working for this small political data company. It was actually called Political Data. And what Political Data did was it took the voter registrations from all the different counties in California, it cleaned them up, it normalized them, it added additional data points, and then it sold those data files to campaigns running statewide or local or Senate sort of elections in California. And so I actually, like, coming into the iProfile job, I actually had a year and a half of experience at another data company. And so the universe had a plan for me to work in data. I was in it when I was 17. The one job I found after my first year in college was another data business. And so I think and not only that, this was 2002. So the SaaS model wasn't like that very popular back then. Mm-hmm. And so not only did I get the experience in data, but the real valuable experience that I got there was understanding how to build an annual subscription recurring business. Because I could have started DiscoverOrg and done it in, I could have made it professional servicey. I could have made a bunch of mistakes around the business model, but really nailing the idea that people are willing to pay for this in an annual way on a subscription, that made a really big difference. And I just wouldn't have known or understood that business model had I not taken that job at iProfile.
Yeah, and I think many of the other data companies that were around even during that time, they didn't survive because they were doing on a per contact basis. And I think that model didn't survive. And I think your approach to the business model, I think it's definitely have helped you in the growth that it had.
Totally. Absolutely. And, obviously that model brings with it a lot of other issues. We're talking about churn and net retention being one of those. And so you really do have to learn unique muscles when you're running a SaaS business, but definitely better than any other business model.
And obviously we're hearing a lot about data and privacy recently in the news. Google, Facebook, and all those guys are making those headlines. But where do you think data is headed? Obviously you're in the data business and you have to be in the forefront, and obviously you're a professional who are trained about legality of all these things as well. So what do you see where the data is headed?
Yeah, so I think two things. Number one, data privacy is not going away. It's not like an issue that 10 years from now, nobody's going to care about anymore. It's here to stay. It's a generational issue. People will always care about data privacy as long as we're alive. And so knowing that and having that as a framework, that you have to continue to invest in being transparent around data collection. You have to continue to invest in making sure that you're way ahead of the regulations on the books. And so, we are very focused on data privacy as a topic for the company. We have a team of data privacy practitioners who are focused on these topics and making sure that we're doing all the right things from a data privacy perspective. Also making sure, we work with 50% of the Fortune 500, 30% of the Fortune 1000. That team does a great job of making sure that our largest multinational clients are very comfortable with our privacy posture and what we're doing from a privacy perspective. And that's everything from a notice and choice program that we implemented, where we actually go out and give proactive notice to anybody whose information we've collected, to our automated privacy center that lets any data subject go and see the information we've collected on them, have that information updated or removed from our platform in a totally automated way. To a program where if we don't have somebody's email address and we can't notify them that way, that we'll make a call to them or we'll send them a text message that we've collected their information. And so making sure that we're way out in front, making sure people understand from a data privacy perspective how we're collecting that information and that we've collected it, and then working with our clients to help them navigate those regulations and make them comfortable with our posture there. Those are two things we're very focused on today, but I think we'll continue to innovate around transparency and data collection kind of notices as we continue to build the business.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest problem marketers and salespeople are going to be facing is especially as these platforms like Apple not wanting to disclose the information about who's engaging with your ads and all sorts of other things like that. We're going to have less and less visibility in the digital marketing world as we got used to that the granular data that we were getting, but I think less and less of that is going to be available with all these platforms trying to solve for the privacy issue.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And so I think what that means is, number one, your first party data becomes really important. And then number two, being able to marry your first party data, people who are engaging on your website or downloading white papers or visiting your website or engaging with your emails, marrying that type of engagement with third party data like ours to say like, hey, I want to know everybody who's engaging on my website and who is spiking on intent for my products or solution. Or I want to look at everybody who's going to my website who also fits my ideal customer profile, is at least 100 employees, is in manufacturing and pharmaceuticals, and is this buyer, the CIO, the VP of IT, so on. So I think marrying your first party data with third party data assets like ours will become increasingly important. And I know, Sam, at One IMS, you guys are doing this all day, really helping your customers identify lookalike audiences, marry the information that's coming from Hubspot with information coming from ZoomInfo to make sure that they're constantly targeting the right people at the right time. That's not going away at all.
Yeah, and I think the challenge most people have is they probably are not starting with any sort of data, especially if they're a brand new company or a brand new product they're coming to market, and they need to find the right buyers to kind of fill the funnel with, right? In those instances, they still need to have a source for data and before they can start anything. And I think having the power of intent data allows them to spend their money where they're going to get the most or optimal results, as opposed to just spreading their money far and wide and expecting for the best results, right? So I think intent data has a lot that it's going to add in the future, especially as people are trying to build their pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I think about is they asked Jeff Bezos once, what's going to change in the next 10 years? And he said, look, I spend a lot of time thinking about what's going to be the same 10 years from now. And for Amazon's business, what's going to be the same 10 years from now is people are still going to want the lowest prices, and they're still going to want fast delivery. Like, there's no universe where 10 years from now, somebody's like, I really love Amazon, but I wish they charged more and delivered slower. Like, that's not a universe that exists. And so he says, because I know those two things as fundamental truths, I can spend a lot of money and invest a lot of resources behind delivering faster and being the lowest cost provider. I think in my space and in ZoomInfo space, the thing that will never change 10 years from now, 20 years from now, is that sellers and marketing and sales organizations will always say, I want to be in front of a buyer when they're considering purchasing a product like mine, period. End of sentence. No one 10 years from now is going to say, I wish that I just got in front of more prospects who weren't interested in my products or services, or who weren't in market for my products and services. And so we can invest a lot behind intent data. We can invest a lot behind identifying the visitors to a company's website, because you will always want to be in front of your potential buyers when they're in market for your products and services. And so I think that will be a long-term vision for ZoomInfo. We'll continue to invest in making sure our customers are in front of the right people at the right time.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's not just about just the accurate data, right? But also the most efficient and effective way to get the right prospects information, who's in the market. That actually makes the marketers and salespeople more efficient in doing their job. So I think that's where the power of data comes. So obviously, Henry, you've built this amazing company from the ground up, and you took it to DiscoverOrg. You took it from 0 to 380 million, and part of your growth strategy was acquisition. Was it always acquisition a number one priority in your growth strategy, or just so happened to become one of the strategy that you leveraged?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was one of our strategies or an expected strategy early on. I think it became one, and then became a bigger one because it turned out we were pretty good at it. But early on, we were just focused on building a really profitable, fast-growing company. And then it turned out that if you're running a really profitable, fast-growing company, that the way you're running the company is, if you're focused on operational excellence, the way you run sales, the way you generate leads, the way you manage G&A, the way you optimize go-to-market, if all of that is truly best in class, that means most of your competitors are not best in class around those areas. And so you have an opportunity. We ended up with opportunities to acquire our competitors and really embed our business motion and our business operations into those companies to make them more efficient, to make them more effective, to make them grow faster and grow more profitably. And so really what M&A ended up being for us early on was an opportunity to flex the operational excellence we had built around the company. And I think what it had evolved to was something more strategic, like the ZoomInfo acquisition, which was much more about giving the market really what they had always asked for, which was, incredible coverage, and then incredible depth of coverage and accuracy of that coverage. And so we were able to, marry what we had built with DiscoverOrg with ZoomInfo to build the business, which is now, just under 500 million in revenue today and continues to grow at a pretty fast clip. Largely because I think the strategic vision came together with M&A. And I think in the future, what we look at is much more strategic opportunities to really build out a best-in-class go-to-market platform inside of ZoomInfo that's really with a foundational level of data underneath it.
Yeah, and I guess you kind of almost answered my next question, which is basically not very many people can say they took a company public, and surely not very many people can say they took a company public during a pandemic. So what was the secret sauce that ZoomInfo had that allowed it to go public when many of the businesses were closing doors?
I think it's a combination of two things. I think one, the space that we're in has an incredible amount of tailwind behind it because companies are moving to digitize the way they go to market. And so there was, pent up demand pre-pandemic for products and services like ours. And I think maybe so that's one thing. And so pandemic or no pandemic, we had the wind blowing at our backs going into 2020. I think the second piece is I think the team that we've built, the culture that we've built at ZoomInfo, people come in every day looking to get a little bit better, looking to be best in class across their departments, looking to win and be competitive. And I think that team really rose to the challenge when the pandemic hit and really delivered a pretty spectacular year. You just, when you're 1,800 employees, it really just, there's not a lot. I don't have a magic wand. I don't come in and go oh, that's fixed. it really is up to the 1,800 employees who come in every day and make something amazing happen. They define new possibles every day. And so I think that team stepped up in a really big way. Our company stepped up in a big way. And we're just lucky to have put together a great team like that.
Yeah, and I know you talked about earlier with the DiscoverOrg, you said that operational efficiency and excellence that you built, right? So I'm sure there's been some mistakes along the way that you made that you took the learning and tried to improve. Are there any lessons learned that maybe you can share so our audience who are trying to build a company can probably avoid?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the highest level, if I just go back to the last question, it really is all about people. And I think the biggest mistakes I've made in the past in building the business was hiring people too quickly and like not listening to my instinct or gut about people. If you're questioning I did this thing where I would go, okay, I'm working on 10 different areas. And I made this mistake with my first product management hire. I'm working on 10 areas. One of those is product management. And I spend like 15, 20% of my time there. And so if I could just hire anybody who could be focused 100% on product management, wow, what an impact that would make on our business. And so I had a pretty low bar for who I was looking for. And then when you hire somebody against your instinct who's not the best person you can hire, and you have a thinking of like really anybody will suffice as long as they're focused on this, it's just the wrong way to hire. And so at every stage of your business, you should be trying to hire people who are really too good for your business. Because if you're hiring people who are too good for your business today, they will grow into that role, assuming your business continues to grow, and they're going to help you grow it. And then they'll have to evolve to the next stage. And so every time I've thought, just get someone in the seat, I just really need someone in the seat, that was a mistake. Every time that I got someone in a seat and then I realized kind of 3, 4, 5 months in, like this was the wrong hire, it's not going to work. Every day past when I made that realization just hurt the business. And so the biggest advice I can give there, the biggest learning is think of the business as a person, and the business is talking to you and telling you things. And as the CEO and founder of the business, you are responsible for listening and reacting to what the business is telling you. And when the business is telling you this person is not going to work out in this role, and the business is telling you that, you got to make a move. Like you have to make a change, because if you don't, you're not being true to the business. You're not being fair to the business. And really your job as the CEO is to grow the business. And so make those moves quickly. You know what the business is telling you more than everybody else. And so listen to the business and then make those moves when you know they're required.
Yeah, and I think HubSpot did a study. I don't know if it was an actual study, but they shared it with partners that they said every wrong sales hire is a BMW 7 Series. So you got to be extremely careful who you choose as your sales rep, because you're just basically buying and just giving away a BMW 7 Series. So totally. Like you said, and if you keep that, right, you're basically paying for maintenance and not even getting to use it.
Yep, totally. And then there's an opportunity cost too, right? Because you're routing leads that you're generating to an underperforming sales rep, where if you would have just taken those leads and given them to your good sales reps, you would see a much bigger impact from those leads. And you're just, you're wasting money from a marketing perspective. You're wasting money because you're not getting the conversion from the sales rep. Sales was the one area where we were just totally vigilant about. If you weren't improving and getting better and being able to handle the leads that we were spending tremendous amount of money generating, we just had to move you out of the motion.
Yeah, which I remember I've heard you speak a bunch of times in prior conferences where I've been to, where you talk about sales. And I think you had several ways of making it, the accountability, right? And them being personally accountable for their metrics and coming to your office and even hanging on the wall their prior day's performance. Can you talk a little bit about some of that strategy you've employed?
Yeah. So, in the early days, you would print out everybody was accountable to certain metrics, a certain number of emails that they had to send every day, a certain number of phone calls they had to make every day. That still exists today. We're collecting that information in an automated way and then sharing it across the team to show which people are hitting and not hitting those required metrics. One of the things that we implemented a few years ago was, initially we would round robin every lead that came in. Lead came in, Joe got it, then Mary, then Mike, then Joe, then Mary, then Mike, then Joe, then Mary, then Mike. And then what we decided and what we debated for a while and finally made the decision on was, should we be routing the leads, the best leads, to our best reps? And what someone will tell you is, or the argument against doing that is, you just create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your best reps will continue to be your best reps because you're giving them the best leads. And so what we implemented today at ZoomInfo is really a tiered structure. There are 4 tiers, and every one of those tiers are associated to a lead quality. And so a lead comes in, we instantly enrich it with ZoomInfo's API, and then we create a lead score, and a lead can be an A, B, C, or D. And sales reps are in A, B, C, and D tiers. And so if an A lead comes in, it goes to the 20 sales reps in the A tier. And if a C lead comes in, it goes to the 20 sales reps in the C category. And what we're doing in doing that is 2 things. Number one, we're making sure that we're routing the leads with the highest likelihood to close to the reps who are most likely to close them. And then what we're saying is, within those cohorts, within those groups, if I give every person in tier 3 or tier C 20 leads, and then one of the people way outperforms everybody else in that same tier, they have the opportunity to move up a tier. And if they outperform everybody in that tier, they have an opportunity to move up a next tier, or they do automatically move up the next tier. And if they're in the top tier and they're underperforming their peers, they move down to the next tier. And it's totally transparent and everybody sees it. And your ability to get the best leads is incumbent on your ability to convert those best leads. And, conversion is not incredibly complicated. Part of it is skills, part of it is talent. And then a big part of it is just blocking and tackling. Making sure you're following up, making sure you're calling the prospect, making sure you're pushing the deal along. And so it aligns the sales reps' activities to their pocketbooks. And then I think that has made a big impact. We've been able to get a lot more out of the leads that we generate as a result of that tier structure. But it took us a long time to pull the trigger on it because of this whole self-fulfilling prophecy concern. But again, if you're listening to the business is telling you, you should send the best leads to the best reps. That's how you get the most money for the business. And so you have to be true to what the business is saying.
Yeah, obviously it takes some technology to accomplish what you're describing, but in theory, it's very straightforward. I think if you don't have the volume, maybe just using maybe even Excel sheet, you can probably start to monitor and track hey, how well is this prospect? Where is the blockage in the sales pipeline? Where do they usually lose these deals? And is it a personal problem, or is it a process problem? Is it a product problem? And then trying to narrow down, and then maybe try to automate the way that you described using some sort of a CRM system. From what I know, Henry, you are a king of execution. You get things done, and which shows up in your career history and also the kind of business you've built. So what's your secret in terms of avoiding distractions and trying to focus on the most important versus the urgent, or putting aside a task because you're waiting for the perfect moment or the being able to do it perfectly?
Yes, I have not figured this one out. And it is something I think about all the time. Am I spending my time on the most important areas in the business? And that's an incredibly important thing that really haunts me, because I have a limited amount of time. I don't work 23 hours a day. What can I get done in a 10 to 12 hour time frame? And am I doing the most important things during that time that I'm, fully engaged? And so I'm constantly thinking about that. I've done a better job of really at the beginning of a quarter, outlining the 10 things that are most important to me, and then coming back, looking at that throughout the quarter, but coming back at the end of the quarter and really truing up. did I accomplish those things that I said were most important? Did I stay focused on those things? But that is, it would be amazing if some algorithm could just tell me like, hey, spend X amount of time here, X amount of time there, X amount of time there. And then what does your calendar and your time look like compared to where you said you should be spending your time? I haven't found a technology that does that very well yet. So, instead it just like bounces around my brain and haunts me to make sure that I am focused on the right things at the right time.
That's a cool idea. Somebody who's listening could probably go build it.
Yeah, for sure.
Sync your Google Calendar and you set your priorities, and it will tell you, hey, don't take that meeting because it's not going to get you closer to your goal.
Yep.
Pretty
totally.
crazy idea. Obviously, are there any productivity hacks that you have in terms of getting things done, apart from prioritizing and making sure that you focus on your top 10?
I don't have anything like that's mind blowing. I don't use Notion or Roam or anything like that. I write to-do lists. Behind me, you can't see my wall, but it's a whiteboard wall. And so I write up like the 10 things that are most important, and it just stares at me in the face. To-do lists, I write to-do lists every day, and I go through them and make sure that I'm doing all of the things that I list on them. I use Google Docs. You could sit me in front of a computer anywhere, and I don't need my setup because everything's in the cloud. And so I'm using the whole suite of Google tools. Every time I have a thought or a question, I drop it into a Google Doc and organize it that way. We use Slack internally as a communication tool, so I'm using things there, but nothing mind shattering. What about you, Sam? Do you have anything?
Well, I'm also an old school guy, so I actually do like the notes, and checking it off gives me some sort of satisfaction. But then I have the Apple Notes where I just throw all my ideas, and then I have organized them based on business ideas or personal goals, things of that nature. But yeah.
So we do the same thing. I just use Google Docs for what you use Notes for, and I use, here's my list that I'm crossing off of. I use index cards.
Yeah, the reason why I like Apple Notes is it's just a lot faster and it's easy to type something into it. But we are a Google product company as well. But I think it just takes a couple of extra clicks to get to a Google Doc opened up and edit that.
I'll tell you one productivity hack that I have that I shared with my CTO, and he liked it too and is using it. But often I don't like long emails, like emails that require me to really like think through and give a thoughtful response. Those tend to go to like the bottom of my list because usually when I'm in my email, I'm triaging. So I'm looking for like a quick yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Mm-hmm. And so the longer ones, what I do is I have my printers in my office or at home set up to AirPrint and before Google Cloud Print. And so from anywhere, I can click a button and send a document to my printer. So when I get into the office, I grab those things off my printer and I read them and then respond to them that way. But having that paper reminder, I'm still a paper guy, which is rare.
One thing I do that I'm pretty sure you've probably seen from our exchange of trying to coordinate this, I try to write very descriptive titles for the emails and also put bullets or numbers of what I'm expecting them to do. So I'm hoping, because I know how difficult it is when I have people send me emails, I can't find it because they don't put a descriptive title or the body is not very organized. And like you, if it's a long email, I would just put it aside and snooze it and say, there's too much information. If they need it from me, they're going to follow up again. So that's just my other thing that I do. Obviously, if you can go back to your first day of job at DiscoverOrg and give yourself an advice from your future self, what advice would you give yourself?
That's a great question. I think one, I would tell myself, like, hiring is very important. Don't skimp there. Like, don't be fast to hire and slow to fire. Those, that's really important advice. I think I kind of understood that then, but maybe not to the extent that I could have. And then I think the other piece of advice that I would give myself is, if engineering is not working, blow it up and build it somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Because for a long time at DiscoverOrg, I didn't have a very good engineering team. And so I was trapped in this world where like I had all of these really great ideas and all of these ways to innovate and move the market forward, but I could never get it on a screen. And so when we acquired ZoomInfo, one of the greatest things that I got was a high-performing engineering team. It was built on a modern stack. We had smart developers. There was a big R&D center in Israel. And so all of a sudden, literally, I was dusting off rec docs that I had written 4 years earlier and delivering them over to the new engineering team. And like 3 months later, I had working product on those things where in the DiscoverOrg world, it just wasn't even like plausible that I could do that. Now, the benefit of that is because I couldn't get the ball really rolling on the engineering side. I spent a lot of time with customers and understanding the go-to-market motion. So today we run a really great go-to-market motion that got started from the fact that like, I couldn't spend a lot of time on engineering because it wasn't getting me anywhere. So I spent a lot of time on the go-to-market motion.
Yeah, and I think,
but the marriage of ZoomInfo gave me both. I got really lucky there, and so I would have blown up engineering and built it in Austin or brought in a new leader. I probably should have done that numerous times.
Yeah, and we are. Excuse me, we're at 1IMS too. We have a SaaS product. It's called ClickX, which is basically a reporting engine, but we also built our own operating system behind the scene, which we call the 1IMS Home. Essentially, a lot of the ideas that you're describing, oftentimes I feel like the ideas that we want implemented by our engineering team isn't moving fast enough. I think you bring a good point because sometimes the efficiency of your organization is really reliant on some of the technology or the framework that you build. And if you can't get those feature set built, you're falling behind. Maybe your competitors are probably way ahead. So that's a great point in terms of things to look for or to even work on as a priority for an organization. And obviously, you knowing what you know today, obviously you've kind of answered this question. Like, what are some decisions you would have avoided? Would you have done it differently? I guess is a better question, right? So, hey, I wish we haven't done this acquisition or not do this sort of a product.
No, not really. I think sort of everything that I wish we did faster. And so that's a question about like, should I have operated the business as profitably as we operated it as we grew the business? Should I have sacrificed profitability for more investment behind products or more investment behind go-to-market motions? Now, had I done that, then the M&A path would have been less open to me. Because the M&A that we did, we were able to raise debt to do all of the M&A transactions. And so I'm not sure I would have had that path open to me. So all of this is like a give and take. But the one thing I would say is, when you have conviction around some part of your business, don't be shy to overinvest in it.
Mm-hmm. That's a great post. Any other parting wisdom for our audience?
Yeah, I would say the one other piece of parting wisdom is, look, running a company is much more than building a great product. And so I oftentimes hear from young founders or new startups, like all of their focus is on the product that they're building. But a business is much more than just the product. There's a go-to-market piece, there's a marketing piece, there's a sales piece, and you don't really build a great business unless you get all of those things right. And so make sure that you're not over-indexing on product at the expense of go-to-market or over-indexing on go-to-market at the expense of product and engineering. It needs to be balanced. And if you're like the kind of CEO who says like, I hate sales, I don't want to do sales, I think you're probably doing yourself a big disservice because it's hard to build a business when you're not focused on all of the things that make for a great business.
Awesome. Well, amazing advice from a guy that actually built a couple of companies. Well, Henry, I really appreciate your time and thank you so much for the advice you shared with our audience and wish you all the best.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Same to you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by 1IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.